of Room for Discussion in collaboration with the Amsterdam Career Days. For those of you who don't know, Room for Discussion is the student-led interview platform of the University of Amsterdam, with the mission of providing students with in-depth discussions about the significant forces shaping their world. Today, we're deep diving into a topic which is more relevant than ever: sustainability in business. And what better way to do that than with one of the most recognizable brands in coffee today, Nespresso. Our guest today is someone who stands at the forefront of this conversation as the sustainability lead of Nespresso Netherlands. Reineke Riemsdijk is responsible for the company's sustainability strategy, ensuring that the firm's pursuit of quality goes hand in hand with ecological and social responsibility. From recycling programs to goals of carbon neutrality, she works on embedding sustainability in the company's business model. My name is Einar, and I will be your interviewer today. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Reineke Riemsdijk. So, Mrs. Riemsdijk, welcome to Room for Discussion here at the ACD. To start off with, I would like to know what the most exciting thing is about being the sustainability lead at Nespresso. Specifically, do you ever get to see George Clooney?
So, first of all, thank you all for having me here. Really happy to be able to tell the sustainability story for Nespresso. But to answer your question, and I think the thing you want to know most obviously is if I actually ever seen George Clooney. I have to disappoint you. There are only a few within the business that ever seen George Clooney, not myself. But to answering the first question, so what is the most exciting thing? And I think that is, it's the environmental sustainability landscape in general never stands still. And if you look at what Nespresso's done since they were founded in '86, so Nespresso capsules were founded in Switzerland and also launched on the market in '86, came on the Dutch market in '96. And since then, sustainability and ensuring that what we put on the market, coffee as a force for good, is one of the main priorities. And that is what basically my daily task looks like. So that is the main answer, I would say. The sustainability, so our sustainability strategy is built on 5 pillars. So we're focusing on climate and net zero, regenerative agriculture, but also what is very important is communities and circularity, because obviously, and I'm quite sure that it's one of the things you would like to know, we sell coffee in a capsule. So the capsule is made of aluminium, and that is, according to the knowledge of the people, not so sustainable. Which actually is, but I'm going to tell you a bit more about that. And then the 5th pillar is B Corp.
Yeah.
So our B Corp strategy is really important.
You mentioned a lot of specific things that I think we'll get into all of those later on in the interview.
Love to, yeah.
The first thing I'd like to know is getting through what your daily routine looks like, or rather, how you found yourself in your current position. So your previous roles was primarily within auditing and assessment.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what triggered this shift into sustainability now?
So it's not really, it's something that happened naturally. And one of the things that our Kika is our CEO of the Nespresso Netherlands, and she liked to mention that a career is actually not a career ladder, it's a climbing wall. And that is also what happened in my career. So it was not something that just happened from going up, reaching to something. So when I started my career, I started actually more in regulatory, so food regulatory, focusing on food law. And then it was basically someone in the business was looking for someone who could do auditing of our suppliers to ensure that they were food safe, but also according to environmental requirements. And I just started doing that, and I loved it. And spent a lot of time visiting all raw material, packaging suppliers. And there I found out that I love the industry. And I saw a lot of factories all over the place. That was not for Nespresso, but it was actually for biscuits and chocolate, total different environment, but also food industry. And that was really, every day was different. But then there was a change in my personal life, because that auditing also involved a lot of traveling. And I got a kid. And then I didn't want to travel that much anymore, but I still love to be in food industry. And then I changed to Nespresso, still starting in a role focusing on food quality, so quality, safety, but more in a retail environment. Because Nespresso in the Netherlands is only retail. The factory are based in Switzerland. And then the sustainability part came more and more from HQs or head office in Switzerland, focusing what we could do locally. So what are the things that you could do locally in a market to have a positive impact? What do we need to do? And then step by step, more and more we got into our, I would say, onshore plane, and I loved it. And then one of the things that really triggered me is we have a coffee, we produce coffee, put coffee on the market in a capsule. And we have a really good way from Nespresso to ensure that all the aluminium of the coffee capsule is actually recycled. You buy the capsules, we provide you a plastic bag, and then it will be recycled. The aluminium will be endless recycled. But the thing is, we ask something from you all to ensure that you keep your capsules, put it in that bag, and then either bring it back to the shops or give it back to a partial deliverer to ensure that that it will be recycled.
Yes.
And there you see something that is hard to change, a behavioral thing. We need our consumers to do that. And that's not increasing. And that's how we ended up starting an association, Coffee Capsule Recycling in the Netherlands, with our competitors.
Yeah. You mentioned the recycling program, which we're going to get into also later. I understand the sustainability of the food industry, that aspect is what drove you into it. So that did end up leaving you in Nespresso, as we know. And I'd like to go into what Nespresso symbolized a little bit. So I think for me and for a lot of people, Nespresso is a brand that is rooted in a quite unique business model, where it's not kind of focused on redefining the coffee experience. So rather than just selling coffee, I think Nespresso curates a lifestyle. What do you think it is that makes Nespresso distinct from its competitors?
I think the main thing is that we have a great coffee story to tell. And because we strongly believe that story should be told properly, that we have our own retail shops. We have the shops, and only in those retail shops you can buy our Nespresso capsules. All our colleagues who work there know the full story, know all the detail, everything about our sustainability programs, about the coffee, the taste, the flavor, all the different machine types we have. It's a full story. So when you're there, you hear the full story. And it's exactly the same when you would buy something online. You have all the details, which we can't provide when you, for example, would buy it in the supermarket.
Yeah. I think so. Expanding the discussion to a little bit to incorporate the setting we're in now. At this career fair, I think many of us here are students of economics or business, myself included. So while keeping up with business news, or just in general drinking way too much coffee, honestly, we can't help but notice the increasing coffee prices.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I was wondering if you could briefly tell us a little bit what's going on in the coffee industry right now.
Yeah, I think I also read the news. So next to that, it's very clear that climate change mainly impacted the coffee prices, and you see they're basically going through the roof at the moment. If you look at the price per kilogram of coffee, it's tripled compared to 5 years ago. So you see that happening. So basically, the cost of actually producing a cup of coffee increase, and you see that also. The result you see in the prices of the coffee sold.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned that it has a lot to do with climate change. I think specifically, I've heard about droughts in Brazil and Vietnam, for example, who are the biggest coffee producers.
Yeah.
So this is clearly a direct consequence of with that in mind, what do you think we can expect the trajectory of coffee prices to be moving from here?
I'm afraid it's not at the end. So yeah.
Right.
So I'm looking at where. So basically, the coffee plant is a very sensitive plant. It needs to have a certain temperature, not too much sun, not too less. And it basically means, when you would make it a simple story, that the coffee plant needs to move more and more up. So it needs to go to higher territories. But that also means if you have a mountain and you go more up, there's less space left. So there's not enough space to put all the coffee plants. And also, you see that in the past, I can already say it this way, in the past there has not been enough attention to the regenerative agriculture way of producing coffee. Meaning that there's a lot of coffee plantations that have only coffee plants, and they need shadow, for example. So there's so you see a little shift, because this is what's happening nowadays. But from plants to coffee bean take 10 years, so you can calculate.
Yeah.
It takes a while before you're actually there.
Exactly. Yeah, these are long-term changes we're talking about, and I think that circles us nicely into sustainability. As you're saying, this is because of climate change. So with the need for more corporate sustainability being clear at this point, what opportunities and challenges do you see in Nespresso's business model for addressing this in terms of sustainability?
I'm not really sure what you mean. So
I mean, with this business model of Nespresso, which
Yeah.
we defined previously, what challenges and opportunities do you see in terms of sustainability, and adapting that to what Nespresso is as a brand?
So, as of the beginning that Nespresso was founded, focusing on sustainability and also in regenerative agriculture, producing of coffee was there. So the official start of the AAA program is a program I'll tell a little bit more about later, is since 2003. So as of then, we started to work with our farmers to ensure that they have, from climate perspective and sustainability perspective, but also from social community perspective, have the right fundament to produce a coffee. So we see that we're, I don't want to say one step ahead of the game, but we have the fundament there to ensure that, that we're ready for the future. But still, it is a fact that climate change, we can predict and we can't predict. So the things that we see, for example, with the weather, we know it's not stable anymore, at least not as it used to be 5 years ago. And what the effect will be on the actual coffee plant, we don't know yet.
Yeah. Do you have any personal goals or ambitions in the role you're in now as for Nespresso's sustainability work?
Speak more in public, but I'm not sure if that's what you mean. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think for me it's really important that the inner me is still believing what we're doing, and I can only say that the company I work in, my colleagues, our local business, but also our head office, is working towards a sustainability ambition I strongly believe in.
So I think on that note of sustainability efforts within companies and corporations in general, I think to a lot of people, corporate social responsibility and that discussion is something that is increasingly feeling like something discussed in smoke-filled back rooms with little transparency to how decisions or how ideas and visions are being implemented in practice. So I was wondering, could you reveal a little bit about how that works, the implementation from idea into program?
Yeah, absolutely. Within Nespresso, we have something which we call the Positive Impact Hub, which is basically a platform from different departments in the organization to work towards positive impact initiatives. And that is on sustainability topics, but also on the social responsibility topics. It's basically everything that we can do as a business and as an individual to make positive impact. And we work on initiatives like accessibility in our boutiques, in our shops, to ensure that everyone, no matter who you are, has a good way of actually experience our Nespresso experience. And on the other hand, everyone within the business gets a day free to do volunteering work. And that needs to be related to something that we as a business can relate to, but it could be basically anything. We do a lot on women empowering. Obviously, tomorrow is International Women's Day. Last year we signed the UN Women Empowering. How to say? I don't know the English word anymore. But we signed.
Treaty.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, it's really something that it's embedded within the business, and it doesn't matter if you're actually, someone working in the shop, in the retail, or it's our CEO. Everyone has the same influence in those initiatives.
Mm-hmm. But about that sentiment of the feeling that you're not getting a huge insight into how these things are being created.
Yeah.
I think that's part of a growing disillusionment with corporate social responsibility in general. Do you see that sentiment? Do you think that's a valid sentiment from people? Understand where that's coming from?
I understand where it's coming from. I would like to recommend everyone to look at the website of Nespresso and to go to our Positive Cup report, which gives all the detail from what we do on sustainability, but also on social impact. You can read all the details, but that's really from head office perspective. And if you want to know more about what we're doing locally, I can tell you a lot about it, but it will be more our people telling the story than actually something which is visible for us.
Yeah, exactly. So the information is out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to get into that specific information then, you've already mentioned to us a bit of the idea behind the coffee capsule recycling program, which you've been a part of here in the Netherlands in setting up. Particularly relevant for Nespresso, considering the single-use aluminium pods being a fundamental part of the business model. So, can you tell us more about this program, maybe specifically how you got involved in setting it up in the Netherlands?
Yeah. Before that, I would like to highlight one more thing, and I think it's really important for you, for just in general, to be told more. When you look at the life cycle assessment of a cup of coffee, and you would compare a cup of coffee over coffee made of a capsule, compared to, for example, coffee of a full automatic bean machine, which one would you think would have a higher impact?
Most people would say the capsule.
Yeah, but I can tell you it's not. Because when you look at what is actually the biggest impact on your cup of coffee, it's not the packaging, it is the green bean supply. So it's the coffee bean, which makes sense if I say that, right? But portioned coffee gives you the opportunity to use the minimum of coffee to get the best cup of coffee, because we have a certain amount of coffee which relates to the cup of coffee. So, as an example, in an espresso capsule or in every capsule, the amount of coffee used is about 6.2 grams. The amount of coffee used for a full bean automatic is around 10, 11 grams. You can only do the math, right? So, it's very clear that the output is not so much, or the impact of a full bean is higher.
So there's an issue with the partitioning of like how much coffee is used when you're not doing any capsule?
Yeah, so when you, for example, you have a bean automat, you use more coffee to produce a cup of coffee, to make a cup of brew a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So you have, like, instead of 6 grams, you have 10 or 11 grams, which you need to brew the coffee. While the packaging, the aluminium packaging, is only 9% of your total LCA.
All right, yes.
But going back
circling back to the question,
yeah.
How did that process look like of setting it up here? And what was your involvement in that?
It's not an easy one, because Nespresso was the first one who started making coffee capsules and coffee out of coffee capsules. But there's now, when you look in the supermarkets, when you look around, there are like thousands of brands of coffee capsules. For Nespresso, we have a solution to ensure that the aluminium would be recycled, and some of our competitors have also a solution, but not something to make it really easy for the competitor. And I come back to the fact that I mentioned before, changing behavior of people related to sustainability is really, changing behavior in general, but related to sustainability is really hard. So what we wanted, and not so much we as Nespresso, but we as a coffee capsule industry, is to make it really easy. So we joined forces we founded an association which has now 10 members, but we represent 96% of the coffee capsule industry of the Netherlands, so basically everyone. Our main ambition is to ensure that everyone can just throw away their coffee capsule, plastic or aluminium, because both are still on the market, and it will be recycled properly. So not going into recycling via incineration, which happen a lot, but that it will be recycled properly from aluminium into aluminium. Yeah. And that goes in several ways. And the really complicated part in the Netherlands is that depending where you live, you either have one bin, everything goes in there, and then it goes to an after sorter, a waste company that sorts all the recyclables out of the total bin of waste. Or they have a PMD container, plastic, metal, drinking cartons. It's already sorted, and that goes to a sorter, and then will be recycled from there.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there's an extensive program now. There are recycling stations in many places, but all, including Nespresso's shops. The thing with the program like this is that it relies on customer effort to go in and hand these in. So to what extent do you think there's how effective can a program like this be in engaging people to actually take that step? How much can we rely on people to do recycling?
So if going back to our dedicated scheme, so what we're doing for Nespresso, yeah, then we need a behavioral change. So we see basically our recycling rate is around 40%, which means that from the capsules that we sell in the NL market, Nespresso capsules, 40% is returned to us to be recycled. Yeah. To me, it's ridiculous because we have the capacity to go to 100%. It's really easy, and I would like to have everyone and stimulate everyone to bring it actually back. But even if we promote, if we if we talk to consumers in our shops, if we do marketing promotions on that, we still see a little peak, and then after a while we go back to that 40%, a little bit around that. So actual changing the behavior of people is hard, and that's why also we and our competitors together, we founded coffee capsule recycling, because we don't believe that the dedicated scheme is the thing that will give us a higher recycling rate. We need to have something really simple, and the solution that we're working towards now is that you can just throw it in the bin. So you throw it in your residual waste. So here in Amsterdam, you just throw it in your normal bin, and then the waste goes to a waste company here in at Amsterdam Havengebied, and then they take the capsule out. Yeah. And then it goes to either pyrolysis or directly to a melter to ensure that there's a new aluminium made. Mm-hmm.
So to sum up, what would you say to those that think that would argue that this recycling program is merely a cover-up for protecting a non-sustainable business model?
I would only say bring back your capsules, and you will see. I can tell you, and even if you want to, I can take you to the place where we recycle it. We split the capsules from the coffee. The coffee is used for compost or biogas, and the aluminium is recycled into aluminium. But even the next step, where we're not asking anything from our consumer anymore, that we're actually doing the work, or not us, but the waste companies are doing the work. They take the capsule out and recycle it. And then it is really a sustainable solution.
How exactly do you ensure that they can take all the capsules out from the regular waste?
Yeah, so it's a technical solution. Yeah. So there's something which is called an eddy current system, which is basically a magnet, but then not for ferrous, but for aluminium. They create a magnetic field and ensures that the aluminium and other non-ferrous materials fly out of the waste. And therefore you have like two streams, non-ferrous, including aluminium, and the rest of the waste.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for clearing up some of the questions about that.
It's really technical, and I know it's a bit maybe too much to explain, but it's I would also say go to the website of Coffee Capsule Recycling the Netherlands, and there's a really nice animation movie which explains it probably a bit better than I've just did in just words.
Yeah, I think another big area when we're talking about sustainability in business, maybe the most widely recognizable one, is about carbon neutrality, net zero goals, etc. So Nespresso stated in 2020 that by 2022, or quote, every cup of Nespresso coffee will be carbon neutral by 2022. In a more recent statement, Nespresso is saying that it aims to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2035 at the earliest. So this might, to a lot of people hearing that, seem contradictory. So could you elaborate on what the difference is between these two measures?
Yes, so it's, I would like to avoid to go really into the technical detail of it, but there's, in the past there was a lot of reaching net zero or reaching carbon neutrality based on the difference between in and offsetting. So basically compensating for the CO2 output by basically planting trees. Nowadays we don't believe that is the right thing to do. We need to look fully into our supply chain to see where we can reduce emission or even take emissions out. And that is also the evolving landscape of the sustainability landscape of, 20 years ago we couldn't think about driving an electric car, and now you would look really strange if someone would drive a diesel car, right?
Yeah.
So it's just the landscape that changed, and we would really, we strongly believe and we want to change our goals to that to ensure that we're actually meeting the high standard. That's what we're working towards.
Yeah, so you mentioned that there's a difference in the reliance on insetting and offsetting. So I think net zero is a stricter goal, right?
Yeah.
That relies more on insetting.
Yeah.
Now this is also terms that might be a little bit clouded for a lot of people. Could you explain how you're working with insetting and offsetting, what exactly those terms mean?
What they mean. Like I mentioned, the offsetting would, for example, be planting trees and therefore reduce the CO2 emission by compensating, while insetting is not compensating but actually reducing.
Yeah, exactly. So insetting is reducing in the value chain.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But I think for a firm to effectively reach carbon neutrality at this stage, before the green transition has gone very far, offsetting is still a crucial part of that process. And I think to a lot of people, when you hear that, there remains a big question mark, even if you assume that the emissions are reduced as much as claimed, which is that the climate crisis is, of course, where time is of the essence. And if you do a carbon sink by trees or agroforestry or anything of that sort, it's something that will reduce emissions at a time in the future, usually in a few decades' time, whereas emissions are released today. So, do you think that can in any way be misleading to argue that compensates?
I'm not sure it's actually, I wouldn't say it's misleading. I see where you're coming from, but on the other hand, we still would like to drink our cup of coffee, right? And if you look at how our LCA or the actual CO2 emission is mainly coming from, then we talk about 46% is coming from the green bean supply. So it's almost half of our chain is actually coming from how the coffee is growing and what is needed to do that. So basically, if you make it really simple, we should stop, farming coffee and or at least, that. So that is. So I understand that.
Say that for anything, but that's not.
Yeah. So you could even argue we should brew coffee without the coffee, which is obviously not what we want, because everyone lives on a cup of coffee.
No, of course. I think just there's a lot of technicality to these terms, so we don't have to go into too much detail about this. But I think the point is with this discussion that this unclarity to exactly what it means and is to many probably contributing to this disillusionment that we talked about earlier, about this feeling of a lack of transparency. Do you think that this is a contributing issue to why people might have this?
I understand, because it's also, like I mentioned before, it's the whole, what is sustainable, what is net zero, how do you calculate your CO2 emission? It's been evolving over the years. It's different what we do now compared to 5 or 10 years ago. So it's not very clear, especially not when you're not working in it every day or when it's not your specialism. But I would really highly encourage you to go to the website of Nespresso and to read our positive cup report, because it will tell you all the details on what we're doing on the net zero plans and how we're working towards that. But the main thing is really reducing and removing CO2 emissions from the value chain.
Thank you for clearing that up. So I think now move towards the audience to see if there's any audience questions. So we'll come a microphone to you. Yes, woman in red.
Hi, and thank you for the presentation. Not presentation, but thank you for the insights in Nespresso's initiatives in sustainability. And from someone who's seeking a job perspective, so I'm very curious about how do you cooperate with each other in the department or in between the departments to push forward the projects in terms of the sustainability approach initiatives, and how do you find the projects are promoted or developed by people in the company?
Thanks for the question. Can I know, just out of curiosity, what's your name?
Oh,
And
my
what's your
name is
background?
E.
E?
Yes.
And what's your background? What are you studying?
I'm studying linguistics in Leiden University. Yes.
Nice to meet you. So, thanks for your question. I think I've already sort of made the link to what we're doing in the organization to what we call the Positive Impact Hub. And that hub is not a meeting of which we say this and this people need to go into that meeting, and then from there we go to what we think as a business is the right initiative to work on positive impact, which is broader obviously than sustainability or environmental impact. You can sign up for it, or you can say I have a really good idea, or have you ever thought about this? And then we work in that group to see, okay, what is the idea, what is the feasibility, what is needed to make it happen, what would be the impact, which is obviously really important, and does it fit within our business strategy? And those things together will then result either in a project, and that project is then taken out of the Positive Impact Hub and will be separate in the organization, just we drive it as a project, and then obviously we finalize the project, and then it's something that we add on to our list. And that is how we, together with the whole business, try to ensure that everyone has feels the urge to commit to what we as a business believe in. And that is the one thing which is important. And then on the other hand, we are B Corp certified. We were certified in 2022. And this year we will have our recertification. That is also something to ensure that you're B Corp, you need to provide all the information, really, literally everything. And that is also a business effort. I'm not the one providing the information because I can't. So we need all the information from everyone. And it gives really insights of what you're doing as a business. And also where are the gaps. So what are the things that we really need, want to work on. So yeah. Does that answer your question, Lee?
Yes. Okay.
Good.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, gentleman in gray suit.
Thank you. So I'm Matthew. I'm currently doing my MBA at UVA. I've got a background in public sector, so I was working for the UK government for like 7 years before doing this. So thanks for telling us a bit more about what you do with the waste component. So you get the aluminium and you get the coffee grounds. Do you monetize from selling it on? So do you sell those waste products, or do you just hand it over to the recycling company? So I'm quite interested in that element. And I've got 2 more questions. Sorry, you can cut me off.
Let's tell them all, and then I'll try
that was
to
the first
answer
one.
them all. Yeah.
Second one was, so you mentioned the current take-up rate is 40%.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoy bringing my stack back to Nespresso. But is that rate standard across all the countries in which Nespresso operates in? And the third question is about complementarities. So obviously when you have a cup of coffee, it's not just the coffee you're drinking, you're also drinking, a lot of people have milk with that coffee.
Yeah.
Do you think about that with your sustainability lens? And is there scope for Nespresso to kind of move into that space as well?
Okay. Thanks, Matthew, for all the questions.
Sorry. Yeah.
So the first question, I forgot what the first question was.
What was it? It was do you monetize from?
Oh yeah. So
the waste?
what happens with the aluminium
Yeah.
when we send it to recycle? So no. At the moment, all the capsules which go to our recycler, then the aluminium, we decide where it goes. So we know that a part of the coffee goes into compost and a part goes into methanization, into biogas. But from the aluminium, it goes to a melter or depending on the purity of the aluminium, sometimes to pyrolysis. But where it actually goes into, like in which products, that depends. Because with aluminium, you have, it's not only the purity, but you also have the, I don't know the English word, it's legering. So depending on the hardness of the aluminium and the, you need to make something out of it. So you need to mix it with other recycled aluminium. So that's the first one.
So it's just, you just play a recycling role only, just for like the sake of recycling.
Yes, I do. But we have at our headquarters people that has the sort of as a job to ensure that the aluminium goes into the right chain, and we monitor it, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to say that we have a recycling rate of 40%, because that's a claim. Because I say it's 40%, I cannot say it because without the evidence, and we need to ensure that the actual output of the recycler split of the coffee and the aluminium, that the aluminium actually goes somewhere that will be recycled into new aluminium. But that's not specifically my role, it's someone at the headquarters. And then the second question is a 40% rate. If it's like all around the world, no, it really depends. It depends on the country. It also depends on if we have like dedicated Nespresso or we have something like before you have, for example, in Germany, where you can just throw it in the recyclable bags. We have a higher recycling rate. We do have the aim globally to go to a recycling rate of 60% by 2030. So that is the aim globally. And it really depends on which country and even which area of the world, what is the recycling rate. And then the third question related to milk or something similar. We are a coffee company. So we would like to avoid to talk about stuff that we don't really know about. So we're not looking so much into the impact of milk or milk options. We do have now, we just launched a collaboration with Oatly. So we launched a capsule which is the perfect combination if you love oat milk in your coffee. So there's no oat milk in the capsule because a lot of people think that it's just coffee. But if you brew the coffee and then drink it with oat milk, it's really great. I would recommend you to taste it, but that's a different story. So we are more looking into what does our customer want. So it's obviously not only cow milk anymore. So if you go to one of our shops, you will have the opportunity to taste different types of milk. But we don't really look into an LCA or a footprint of that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for those audience questions. I think now is the time where I would like to move the conversation into perhaps a broader discussion about sustainability. So sustainability is fundamentally a concept that can be applied very generally to all aspects of society. Commonly identified as being, of course, ecological, which we talked about, but also social and economic sustainability.
Yeah.
What do those terms mean for you in how you think about operating Nespresso towards a more sustainable direction? That broader understanding of sustainability, also in a social aspect primarily.
So it really depends on in which direction, because it's really broad. I mean, that subject, it's so, there's so many things to talk about, but it's really broad. But the first thing that pops in my head is that we have a slogan at Nespresso, which basically says you can be you. No matter what your background, what your preference, whatever, you can be you. So that is really something that you feel when you start working for us. And we try to do everything for our people, but also throughout our supply chain to ensure that we commit to those social responsibilities.
Yeah, and you think communicating that is part of that social responsibility?
Yeah, it's also in the Positive Cup report. For example, I think, so for example, on the social, from headquarter perspective, on the social responsibility, what we do for our farmers. So what do we do at the country of origin to ensure that they get a minimum wage to live, so which is enough to actually, have a proper living there, but also something which is really normal for us here in the Netherlands and in most of the countries in Europe is that you have a pension, for example. In most countries where you farm the coffee, there is no pension. It basically you work until you can't work anymore, and then you only hope that your family will support you. And the same thing is going to school, getting education is not a common thing in a lot of the countries. So from our community perspective, we build those community locally with our farmers to ensure that those two things, like the pension, the education, but also that you see a lot of the farmers being really old, and a lot of the young people move away from those countries because in other places in the world there are better perspectives. So also to ensure that we build a strong community with a whole village, literally, is one of the things that we're working on, and that's a part of our AAA program.
Yes.
And that is also something that you will see in our positive reform.
You just mentioned it. I was going to get into the AAA Sustainable Quality Program, which
Yeah.
you are working on in collaboration with the Rainforest Alliance.
Yeah.
So what I think is very interesting, you already mentioned some of the programs, some of the specifics you're working on with pensions and so on. What I think is really interesting is how you see the interlinking of ecological and social issues in this context, because we've already established that climate change is having a big impact on coffee farmers. So how do you see that in your social responsibility efforts of the impact of climate change on these farmers, and what can you do to help there?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing to do for us as a company that buys the coffee from the farmers is that we ensure that they have the best fundament to make the coffee, to ensure that the coffee bean actually grows. So regenerative agriculture, ensuring that you have biodiversity in that area where the coffee grows, is really important. It takes time, but we'll do that already for years. It's not something, I know it's a buzzword, you hear it all the time, every company mentions it, but we do that already since 2003, which is not a very long time, but when you look at when the climate change started to be something really important on the agenda, we started doing it, and it was there already a little bit before as well. Yeah.
We were mentioning communicating your social responsibility goals. So on that note, which you already mentioned earlier on in the interview, is certificates. So March is B Corp month, and
Yeah.
you are since 2022 certified B Corp corporation. Therefore, we wanted to get into a little bit about what this certificate symbolizes for you and what exactly was demanded of Nespresso in order to obtain it.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think for us, B Corp stands for what we are as a company, and I know there is quite some reluctancy on big corporates being B Corp certified, but it's even been all over the news. How can it be? Because B Corp started only certifying really small companies that doing a lot of sustainability initiatives, but we do that as well, only on global scale. And what is really important, and what is important to know, and what also is one of the reasoning for B Corp to ensure that the bigger, let's say, corporates also will be B Corp certified, is that we as Nespresso, and Nespresso is even apart from Nestle, we have a huge reach. So when you look globally on where we can make impact, it's massive. So if you, as a company, commit to B Corp and ensure that you would like to reach every recertification a higher B Corp score, which basically means that you work towards sustainability and social economic goals, it means that you make a huge impact on global scale. So from that perspective, it's not. I really encourage and I'm really proud of the smaller sustainable companies being B Corp certified with much higher scores than we have. But we have a global scale, and we also are impacting all over the world, and we reach every consumer that buys an espresso cup of coffee or a Nestle product. We tell the B Corp story, and we tell what we're doing, and we would encourage our consumers to work with us, and the impact is much higher. But that was on your question. I forgot what your question was.
Yeah, well, my question was, what exactly has been demanded from you in order to obtain it?
Oh yeah, so and we strongly believe that what B Corp stands for is also what we as Nespresso stands for. So the sustainability and environmental, so reducing environmental impact, focusing on sustainability goals, the net zero, but also ensuring that the communities, the things that you do locally, where you can influence. We strongly believe that we want to be a part of that.
Right. Yeah, and you were mentioning just briefly the scores, and because the B Corp works with a pretty elaborate score system, and certain, I think the max is about 200 and the threshold is 80.
Yeah.
And so just a few years ago, Nespresso did pass this threshold with an average score of 84.
Yeah.
Or it's depends on how you see it. I know it's a difficult one to obtain, but it's barely passing the threshold, and it's more so mostly in Europe than in other countries where it's just about the threshold. Now, of course, it's admirable that there's been a huge improvement, and that should be communicated. But do you think this is an area where that could be made more clear in order to improve the transparency we talked about and avoid greenwashing accusations?
So yeah, I think what is important to understand, the Nespresso score is a global score. So if you look at Zone Europe or even in the Netherlands, it would be a different score if you only look at that. We look at global, so we had South America and the Asian parts, including us and also our factory. And that we will also be recertified this year, so we're not sure where we end up, but we're really aiming for higher than 90%, a 90-point score, I have to say. So maybe we have another conversation at the end of the year, but still, because it's every 3 years, so you have a benchmark 3 years ago and now will be the recertification in October. I do think it would be, people should be, or companies should be transparent about their score, and also where, what are the areas they would like to improve on, impact on, and what are the areas that, maybe as a consumer you can impact on.
Mm-hmm.
But it is true when you have a huge supply chain, which we have. The impact is not something that you will arrange in a day.
No, of course. So as this interview is slowly wrapping up, I'd like to acknowledge that we are at a career fair and bring the discussion more towards the audience. So, not all these questions again, but rather to ask you, because there's of course a lot of people just starting out their careers, interested potentially in how they can contribute to more sustainability in the current business climate. What advice would you like to give to those who do try to enact positive change while working in the private sector?
I think my biggest advice would be, it's very cliche, but follow your heart. You can't work for a company that you not strongly believe in what they're doing. So if you, especially when you work on environment and sustainability or communities or the social part, if you're not believing that you make impact, because I think most of the people who work in a role like I am, or something similar, would like to make impact. And I mean, I can make impact. Small impact, because I'm just one person in a business, and we're even, from a special perspective, it's just the Netherlands, and then you have global, but the actual impact that myself and my team is making on a daily basis is worth it for me to work in that role. And I think that is my advice for everyone who's starting a career, that you should believe the ambition. Because that is nice work, that is not work, it's fun.
So believe in yourself and go to something where you actually believe yourself in the ambition of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and with that, I would like to thank you very much, Reineke Riemsdijk, for joining us today.